Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you to day 2 of our challenge to read the Gospel of Mark, or as Greg Stevens called it, Mark Madness. That's not bad. And Greg spent 10 hours on Tuesday coming up with that phrase. But hey, it was worth it. It was a good one. And points to Greg for coming up with such a witty remark. So the goal today is to read Mark 1 through 8. These 8 verses really establish the foundation of the Gospel of Mark. A few things I want to point out to you as you read them. First, spend a little bit of time on Mark 1:1. It reads, "The beginning of the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God." There's a whole lot of important vocabulary wrapped up into that one verse. First, Mark begins by saying the beginning. He probably means this in a couple of senses. First, it's the beginning of the gospel. It's the beginning of his work. Everything that follows is good news. But it also probably points back to the beginning words of the Bible in Genesis 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He's pointing to a significant beginning, the beginning of a new creation. He uses the phrase good news. Whenever you hear us use the word gospel on a Sunday morning or in other places, gospel literally means good news. It literally means an announcement. Typically, in the Roman Empire in the first century, it had the feeling of a significant announcement for the entire empire, an announcement that the life in the empire is going to change. So, for example, there are birth announcements that are gospel. I have one here that is from Caesar Octavian from 9 BC, which uses the term good news and speaks of his birthday as, quote, the birthday of the God that was for the world, the beginning of his good news. So there is good news about the birthday of the Roman Caesar. More often than that is it would be an announcement from a battlefield that victory has been won. So I am here to proclaim gospel, proclaim good news that we have won, that victory has been achieved on the battlefield. The Jews would have used it in a slightly different way. You might want to look at Isaiah chapter 52, verse 7, or Isaiah chapter 61, verse 1, because the Old Testament also speaks of good news. And just like the Roman context, where this news represent a change in the fortune for everybody in the empire, so the Old Testament uses the term also to represent a change. New things are happening. Um, the second phrase or word that is important for you to think about is Messiah. This is the term Christ. When we say Jesus Christ, we're actually giving Jesus name and a title. Jesus who is the Christ, or Jesus who is the Messiah. And to be a Christ or to be a Messiah was to be an anointed one, often a royal figure. The Jews, the nation of Israel, would anoint their kings with oil, and they would be a Messiah, an anointed one. There's even a situation in the Old Testament where a non-Jewish king is a Messiah. That is Cyrus, king of Persia, because he was anointed by God to fulfill a specific purpose for God's people. That is, to take over Babylon and to allow the nation of Israel to return home from exile. So all of this is in the background when Jesus is called a Messiah, an anointed one who has come to fulfill God's purposes. And then there's the phrase Son of God, which obviously has hints of the divinity of Jesus Christ. As you continue with verse 2, going through verse 8, you'll see that the focus shifts. It shifts from Jesus, this anointed Son of God, to John the Baptist. And John the Baptist has an interesting role. John the Baptist has the role of fulfilling the prophets. So here you'll see a quote from Isaiah and a quote from Malachi. Even though Mark introduces it as a quote from Isaiah, but it's actually a quote from two different prophets, Mark's not lying, Mark's not wrong. He's just referencing Isaiah first because Isaiah was the biggest and the baddest prophet. He was the one that everybody refers to very often in the New Testament. And Malachi, while important, did not play as quite a significant role as Isaiah. So he simply mentions Isaiah. But John the Baptist fulfills these words from Isaiah and Malachi, that God is going to send one who prepares the way for the Lord. The Lord is coming to do a significant work. The Lord is coming to bring good news. The Lord is coming to transform things. And John the Baptist is the one who introduces us to the Lord. Who is the Lord? It's Jesus. So all of this comes together in the first 8 verses of the Gospel of Mark. And you see what Mark is doing. He's introducing us to Jesus, and he's connecting Jesus to the promise of the prophets. I've mentioned this recently on a Sunday morning. One way to think about the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament is that the Old Testament contains promise, and the New Testament contains fulfillment. To say it another way, the New Testament is the fulfillment of the promises made in the Old Testament. And as Mark is showing us, these promises come to fulfillment in Jesus Christ. So today I want you to read Mark 1, 1 through 8 at least once. Then I want you to go to the playlist in our YouTube channel, look at the video titled Messiah from the Bible Project. That'll give you an overview of who the Messiah is. And then I've also provided a video with the lyrics from Chris Tomlin's Jesus Messiah. Having all of this background in mind may help you understand those lyrics in a different way. So enjoy your reading from Mark today, and tomorrow we'll continue Mark Madness.